So maybe we should kick off the meeting now. Good, great. Good afternoon, colleagues from the Asia Pacific. Good morning, colleagues from Rome. I'm really delighted to be with you today to moderate the latest event in our APR webinar series. And this one is dedicated to digital agriculture in the Asia and the Pacific, and more particularly to look into strategies for donor impact to accelerate digital transformation in the region. We've really succeeded to have a lineup of prominent practitioners in digital agriculture in the region, from our partners, the Asian Development Bank, Grow Asia, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. With no further ado, I would like just to hand over to my colleague, Brenda Gunde, the Global Senior Technical Specialist in IFAD, to give a few welcoming remarks, and then we will proceed to sharing insights from the report commissioned by IFAD and prepared by Grow Asia on digital agriculture. And then we will hear from our partners, the Asian Development Bank and the Australians, about their own experience and their own practice, and particularly their ideas about how we can really join forces to accelerate digital transformation for the benefit of smallholders in the region. Over to you, Brenda, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Kalim. Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on digital agriculture in Asia and the Pacific, strategies for donor impact. Mobile technologies, as well as the usage of smartphones, continue to increase in the Asian region. And for the past 15 years, mobile penetration rates, including access in rural areas, has steadily increased. However, as we may know, despite the steady increase, challenges do exist that act as barriers to adoption of these digital technologies. The report to be shared in this webinar by Grow Asia, commissioned by IFAD, will illustrate how digital technologies are and will continue to reshape the agriculture sector in the region. I would like to recognize the Asian Development Bank and the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for their ongoing partnership and collaboration with IFAD, and especially looking forward to learning more on their experiences and insights on how digital technologies are impacting food systems in Asia, as well as lessons on approaches on private sector development. In this webinar, we'll understand how digital technologies have transitioned and gained traction through waves of digital transformation, using mobile technologies for communication through calls and SMS by farmers, to enhancing traceability and increasing agribusiness digitization. In 2019, IFAD approved a new ICT for development strategy, which provides us a framework for leveraging ICT and digital technologies to increase impact and improve economic and social conditions of rural people. Through this ICT for development strategy framework, we are focused in ensuring that digital technologies are easily adopted by farmers, are responsive to the pain points faced by farmers, including access to markets and inclusive financial services. Our focus is ensuring that we pursue viable solutions that have potential for scale, are responsive to the demands from farmers, and can enhance government system strengthening and support the deliver IFAD mission. At the same time, as we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the demand for integrated of digital technologies in our programs. Therefore, in order to achieve the mission mandates and understanding how digital technologies are evolving and how these technologies are best suited for farmers, rural farmers, it is important. We commend the depth analysis that Grow Asia has done in this report. With help from IFAD and other donors, we aim to understand how digital technologies are reshaping agriculture in the Asian region. It is important to remember that digital transformation is a constant wave of change, which will require partnerships across different actors in the public as well as private sector, as well as working with government and different donors. These partnerships and collaborations will effectively address challenges and barriers in adoption of digital technologies by smallholder farmers and enhance their economic resilience and sustainability. In conclusion, I would like to stress that although this report was commissioned by IFAD, we believe it is a vital and relevant tool in providing insights to donors as well as key players and development in the development of strategies and accelerating uptake of digital technologies. With that said, I warmly welcome you to this webinar and look forward to your active engagement and conversations around the report and knowledge that will be shared through this webinar. Thank you, and over to you, Karim.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for setting the stage with these welcoming remarks for our today's webinar. As you see on the agenda, we have 3 presentations. The first one will be made by Paul Voutier, the Senior Advisor in Grow Asia, on the overview of the report, sharing insights on the report itself, and particularly highlighting the strategies for joint action. I would like to remind speakers to really make sure we don't really lose the attention on time. So time management is really important to allow sufficient time for moderations and interactions with the audience. With that, I would then like to invite Paul just to share his presentation with us. Over.
Fantastic, and thank you very much for organising the session today, and certainly appreciate the support of IFAD in putting this report together, and I hope that the insights are relevant not just to IFAD but also to the ADB and to DFAT. My name is Paul Voutier. I'm the Senior Advisor at Grow Asia. Grow Asia is based in Singapore, and our mandate is to improve the livelihoods of farmers right across Southeast Asia. There are about 70 million small family farms across Southeast Asia, and Grow Asia particularly works with the private sector, with agribusinesses, as well as policymakers, around the idea of multi-stakeholder partnerships and bringing partners together around this challenge of improving the livelihoods of farmers. And a particular part of that has really been our focus on digital. And it's been a theme now at Grow Asia for almost 4 years. And that was a recognition that with digital tools, we have a very interesting turning point in the way that we can structure smallholder value chains and address many of the challenges that we've been talking about with smallholder value chains for a long time. So when we were asked to do this study for IFAD, we started with 3 very basic propositions: that there are 70 million small family farms across Southeast Asia. Most of those farms grow crops such as corn and rice, but of course, coffee and cocoa are also very common, and vegetables is a growing sector across the region. We also took IFAD's mission, which is to transform rural economies and food systems by making them more inclusive, productive, resilient, and sustainable. And we saw a range of digital tools that were emerging which seemed to align with this mission. So Grow Asia over the last 4 years has run hackathons, we've run accelerators, we've run learning series for agribusiness leaders. We've spent a lot of time talking to startup founders, to VC investors, to farmers, really seeking to understand the shape of this opportunity. And I think what IFAD were looking for was, from a donor's point of view, what has Grow Asia learned about digitization in the region, and how might that shape a donor strategy? So from what we know of observing the sector and talking to the different actors who are at the vanguard of building these new technologies, where does a donor fit in? What's the most appropriate role for a donor given what's happening in terms of digitization? So if we wanted to look at the sector, the digitization of farming in Southeast Asia, it's helpful to look at the range of technologies which are now available. So this is a reasonably comprehensive list of the startups and some of the larger companies that are building and operating technologies for smallholder farmers in our region. And we've grouped those into some fairly useful groups. Not everything fits very nicely into a category, but we have tried where possible to group it to 5 groups. This is really a map of the innovators and the businesses that are building digital systems for smallholder farmers. Of course, beyond the logos that you see here are things like the chat platforms like WhatsApp and Line, Facebook, which also have a really important role to play. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Many of the logos that you see here have come to exist in only this last few years. So it's a rapidly changing sector. So it's helpful to position ourselves in terms of what's happening in digitization in Southeast Asia. So if we go back about 10 or 15 years, the move away from simple voice calls begins to emerge in Southeast Asia on our farms. So we start to see farmers using SMS, and then later we start to see farmers using chat platforms, and I mentioned WhatsApp and Line before. And what farmers began to do was use these platforms to transact with the traders, the people that buy their corn or their rice, the retailers who sell the inputs and crop protection products, fertilizers, as well as those that lend the money. So what we're starting to see is the transformation of the way that smallholder farmers transact with their key business partners. And they start to use these new technologies. And when we talk to farmers, we see a lot of efficiency being gained from these tools. So we are now seeing farmers selling to a much wider variety of traders because it's easy to communicate with them, comparing price across different retailers. They're able to connect with a wider network of lenders and understand what their options are. And this is, I think, probably the most significant wave of innovation that's occurring around small farms in the region. And it's something that's growing year on year, is the adoption of these technologies for the purpose of transacting with those key parties. And it's something that, again, later on in the report, we'll talk about just how important these, what seemingly very basic technologies are. If we go back a shorter period ago, so sort of 5 to 10 years ago, we start to see the emergence of what we call the agribusiness platforms. So these are your traceability platforms. They're really about supply chain intelligence. So this is the likes of your Olams, your Cargills, using technology in a way they hadn't before to trade with smallholder farmers, to understand where their extension workers are. They start to use satellite imagery to map where their suppliers are. They start to track and trace the product that they're buying. So the first wave is really adoption by farmers. It's the use of smartphones to communicate. The second wave, we really start to see the growth of these database-driven systems for agribusiness. And to date, they are the two biggest waves. So we have farmers using their mobile phones to communicate, and we have agribusiness beginning to use database-driven tools for traceability. But what's coming next? And that's the really important question for a donor, not so much what has happened, but what's likely to happen. We're starting to see the emergence of 5 new technologies. One is digital trading. So if we stepped out into a village today and met with a trader who is buying rice or corn from farmers, they'd mostly be using paper to track their business. They wouldn't necessarily be using technologies like GPS to tag where they're buying from. But we are starting to see, beyond simple messaging systems, the emergence of digital trading. And I suspect that this will be quite a significant trend because there's a lot of value that gets left on the table because of the inefficiencies of trading at the moment. We may see the emergence of digital payments by farmers and to farmers. We might see the emergence of lending to farmers from digital platforms, and we are indeed starting to see some scale around this one in Indonesia. We might see the emergence of advisory apps, so we might see farmers beginning to use a mobile application to access information about how to grow their crop or about the weather. And we might see the emergence of hardware and IoT sensors, as well as robots and drones. If we step even further into the future, we actually might see farmers begin to trade their commodities directly on e-commerce platforms without a trader intermediary. If we were to sort of have a bit of a guess about the numbers, So we're talking about 70 million small family farms. We're probably seeing 30 or 40% of them in that top category there where they're starting to use chat. We're probably seeing a couple of percent that are being a part of an agribusiness platform. And we're seeing absolutely tiny numbers of these red bars. We're seeing tens of thousands of farmers adopting those red technologies on the right there. So lots and lots of potential for growth on those technologies. So before we think about where a donor would step into this ever-changing digital landscape and play a role, we have to understand who the actors are there, who are there already. Who's driving this innovation? Who's driving this change? And now, obviously, at the center of it, we have the innovators. We have the people that create these new technologies, whether they're digital lending platforms or payment platforms. We need innovators. We need people that come up with these things and build them. Agribusiness has played a relatively small role to date, particularly around those agribusiness platforms and those traceability solutions. We've seen mobile operators attempt to build some solutions for farmers, but they are, of course, necessary for providing network infrastructure in any case. We've seen governments make attempts towards policies which are friendly to digital innovation. And we've seen quite a lot of investor activity. So we're seeing a strong interest in agriculture and sustainability, particularly as investors become more and more impact oriented. And finally, of interest, particularly to Grow Asia, has been the growth of accelerators and competitions. And what's interesting from a donor point of view about accelerators and competitions is that they really happen at the axis of the investor, the agribusiness, and the innovator. And as we think about what it's going to take for farmers to get access to these technologies, three parties have to come together: an investor, an innovator, and an agribusiness. It's very rare that an innovator is going to be able to build a technology straight out to farm without some sort of agribusiness partnership. They need the scale of agribusiness, they need the contacts of agribusiness. So from a Grow Asia point of view, our strategy has been very much built around how do we bring investors, agribusiness, and innovators together? Because that's the magic. When those three things come together around a technology, that's when we get scale. So we're very interested in that last category of accelerators and competitions because of their capability to bring together those key actors. And then we said, okay, well, if that's the landscape, if that's what's happening around farms in the region, what sort of barriers might there be in place that are preventing farmers accessing the benefit of these technologies? And we concluded that there may be a lack of funding for early stage innovation. There is certainly a lack of coordination and momentum. So coordination is again about those innovators, those investors coming together, doing deals and growing these technologies and governments as well. And momentum is really all about the extent to which people believe this is going to be possible, because our sense is that this becomes possible when people believe that it's going to be possible. And we think there's a lot of room for donors to create a sense of enthusiasm and optimism around these technologies for investors, for agribusiness, for innovators. We also think there's a role to assist governments to drive policies that enable digitization. And on the flip side, not so much the policy side, but the adoption side, we think there's an opportunity for governments to actually adopt some of these technologies, particularly within their extension teams. So these are some of the levers that a donor like DFAT, ADB, IFAD might be able to pull. These are the four levers that we believe you could tap into to really drive growth in this sector and outcomes for farmers. We started with the idea that a good investment by a donor would be characterized by three things. So if IFAD was to invest into this sector, it would want three things to be true. Does the technology have potential to grow? The last thing we want to do is invest in technologies that the private sector is never going to come up with, or farmers never going to scale, or technology that farmers simply don't want. So prudent use of donor funds would dictate that we are driving technologies that have potential. The second question we asked was, is the technology aligned with the purpose of IFAD? Is it aligned with poverty alleviation? Is it aligned with inclusiveness? Is it aligned with farmer empowerment? And finally, can donors do something about this? So it might be a technology that's going to grow. It might even be aligned. But if it's not something that donors can impact and drive, then again, it's a poor use of investing, a poor use of funds. It's a poor investment. And what we did is we asked these three questions for all of the technologies that we're seeing out there. So mobile communication, this is about those messaging services, SMS, reaching out to traders, reaching out to retailers. Will it grow? Yes, absolutely, we believe it will grow. Every time we talk to farmers, we see their desire to use mobile technologies to enhance their relationships with trading partners. Is it aligned with the mission of IFAD and other donors? Yes, again, we really believe it is. It's a very low cost technology. It's very easy to adopt. And we think that is creating real efficiencies in smallholder value chains. And we believe there's some really interesting opportunities for donors to influence the adoption of mobile communication. If we jump over to these traceability platforms for a moment. So this is your traceability, your supply chain intelligence for large agribusinesses. Will it grow? Yes, I think it will continue to grow, but it's very limited. The number of farmers that are part of a structured formal value chain where traceability is applicable is tiny. It's very, very small. Most of the very big crops like rice and corn and the vast bulk of coffee and cocoa may never be traced. May never be part of, and that's simply because those large players aren't the only ones. There's lots of smaller players who are unlikely to adopt those systems. Is it aligned with mission of a donor? Not particularly. We don't think that traceability per se, supply chain intelligence per se, is going to have that compelling outcomes for farmers. There's some good things about it. There's certainly benefits for farmers, but it's not up there with some of the other technologies we'll look at in a moment. Furthermore, we don't really see it as necessarily an area where donors can influence what agribusinesses do and don't do. We then asked the question, will digital trading grow? Yes, we absolutely think people will use mobile apps, databases, even things that begin to look a little bit like e-commerce to trade commodities. Again, is it aligned with the mission of donors? Is it something that can influence? Not so much. Yes, there's efficiencies to be gained, but we don't see a strong play for donors here. Then we jump over to payments. So these are your mobile wallets and other tools for payments. Yes, absolutely. We think it'll grow. We're looking at India. We're looking at China. We are seeing significant growth, and we think that'll flow over. Is it aligned with the mission? Yes, we actually believe it is aligned with donor mission because of what else it unlocks. In India, in China, we've seen digital payments unlock e-commerce. We've seen it unlock digital lending. We really believe that digital payments is foundational to outcomes for farmers. Can donors influence it? Partly. Jumping across to lending, we are very buoyant about lending, digital lending. We know farmers pay obscene interest rates in many cases because they just have only one or two sources of funding for their farm. We know formal lenders have tried previously to reach out to farmers and make loans. It's very hard. Cost of acquisition is an issue. Credit scoring is an issue. Repayments an issue. Digital traps into all of those. And we will see digital lending grow. We are seeing it grow. Again, look to China, look to India, we are seeing growth. So I think that is going to be something we're super excited about. Advisory. We have seen so many advisory apps launched in Southeast Asia, and we've seen so many advisory apps fail to go to scale. Farmers, again, sit down with them, we talk to them. They want to learn from their friends. They want to learn from people they know. They want to connect through trusting relationships. There is a real lack of interest in database-driven, wiki-driven, website-driven advisory We're just not seeing it go to scale. Hardware, so your drones, your robots, etc. We do see it coming to the sector. It'll go to the bigger farms first. We don't really see the alignment with donor priorities at the moment for most of those technologies. There's some with some potential for donors, but we think there's some lower hanging fruit there. So what does all this mean? What this means is that our suggestion in the report is that the role of donors in this sector is threefold. Push mobile communication, get farmers using messaging, using WhatsApp. It's cheap, it's accessible, it brings efficiencies through value chains, and it's growing very quickly. We do see a foundational role for digital payments. It's going to unlock digital lending. It's going to unlock more options for farmers. We think it's going to empower farmers, and we think it's going to make things much more efficient and be a real enabler of so much other digitization, including lending, which is the other one that we are encouraging donors to consider, is supporting digital lending. So I'm going to finish up here and say that we have spoken to farmers, we've spoken to investors, we've spoken to agribusiness. We think we have a fairly good handle on what's happening in digitization of small farms in Southeast Asia. And we think these are the touch points where donors can come in, they can generate impact, generate outcomes for farmers. Digital lending, promoting mobile communication, and supporting digital payments. And we've come back to those levers again. What are the levers donors can pull? Policy advocacy, early stage funding, partnership, building. These are the levers you can pull. These are the technologies that we believe donors should be supporting. Very happy to talk further with anybody here. Send me an email. Very happy to have a chat about the report. Obviously, today's presentation is a very quick overview, and encourage you to jump into the actual report itself. My email is paul@groasia.org. And you can find our other reports. We've got reports on digital credit scoring, digital adoption, digital business models for farmers, all at exchange.groasia.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul, for this insightful presentation. Definitely trying to cluster technologies, look into the dynamic and approach them through different waves, and also single out the barriers for adoption are really critical for us to have a clear picture on what's going on, and also to find the right anchors for our work. So this is really very, very helpful. Before opening up discussions, the idea is to allow 3 different donors, IFAD, Asia Development Bank, and the Australian Aid Agency, to share their own views and tell us what is the present practice right now. And then we can open up and see whether there is really a kind of a consensus on the way forward, and whether the anchors for engagement that you singled out in these presentations are the right ones, and to which extent. Now, I would like to invite my colleague Bashu Avial, the country program officer for Nepal, to make a presentation on the role of digital agriculture and digital tools in supporting the COVID-19 recovery in Nepal. Bashu, over to you.
Hello, Karim, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, clearly, we can hear you. Go ahead, please share your slides.
Is it showing up?
No, we can see it on the screen. No, perfect now. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Karim. Good afternoon, colleagues from Asia, and good morning from the colleagues who are in Europe and other parts, basically. I will quickly go through on our very, short experience, what we are doing in Nepal in terms of digital agriculture. And my basically, I would present very briefly on a small project that is supporting COVID-19 recovery through rural poor stimulus facility that IFAD created once the globe was hit with COVID-19 pandemic, focusing more on digital finance and digital agricultural services. The main objective of this project is to revitalize agriculture extension system during the time, during difficult time, and also to enhance the credit access to farmer. To get into the context, basically it was the COVID-19 that taught us several lessons. We faced the disruption in supply chain. We faced problem in accessing, delivering technical and financial services from both service provider side and also from the farmer side. So that was the reason that we conceptualized a small project that can support both a service provider and farmers in extending the financial services, depending and extending the outreach to the farmer, and at the same time expanding the digital services to smallholder farmers during the time of pandemic, so that it can continue even post-pandemic recovery of the country. So it was a project of total 1.5 million, where IFAD has put 78% and the rest from the domestic. And it started in October, and it is working closely with the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development of the federal government, plus the provincial and local government, along with a 3 IFAD project being implemented by Agricultural Development Bank of Nepal as the lead project agency. The basic objective is basically 3. What we are trying to achieve or direct from this project is driving the rural economic recovery post COVID-19 with a substantial increase in investment in the small scale agriculture sector. At the same time, the project aims at increasing the access of small farmers to institutional financial and market information, and access to agriculture value chains, digital financing and extension. So basically it is how to say, offering 3 solutions. One is the digital finance. It is towards the both in supply and demand side, through introduction of Kisan card. Kisan is a Nepali word synonym to farmers in English. And the second area that it will contribute is the digital agriculture platform. What we are saying is the Kisan application, which provides a bundled solution in terms of agricultural technology, financial technologies and supply chain, and at the same time building capacity both in service provider end and also to the farmer side. So in terms of Kisan card, as the project was signed on in October, around mid-October, then the lead project agency started to work on that and was able to launch this Kisan card in January, as the pandemic was a little bit slower in those days. And basically the object, the Kisan card will be basically, the full development will be in 3 stages. And once completed, the services that it will be offered will be the access debit card and wallet payment services, cash out points that it will provide access to the farmers. It will also provide the credit card services. It will start the merchant point of sale, so that the farmers can draw money and also deposit their money over there. even it would allow the card users among themselves to direct transfer the fund. Also, it would allow the card holders to get their remittance directly in their cards, and also it is envisages to have loan automation processes, and also to have credit rating information of the clients. So in terms of total target, as it is a very short duration project, little bit more than a year, around 15 months or so, we are targeting only 20,000 beneficiaries. In terms of gender consideration, there will be 50-50 participation of male and females, whereas the 30% will come from the youth beneficiaries. In terms of Kishan application, what we are thinking is one application with multiple solutions. This application will provide the farmers, the smallholders, access to inputs, access to various type of information, including market and others, market lending and other information. It will also enable farmer to get extension services through linking with the providers, and also through some recorded messages. And it will also provide opportunity to the farmers to different marketing platforms, and also provides information, or also helps farmer to access credit. So these are the broader framework. These are the solutions that we are thinking the Kishan application will be providing. Basically there will be 4 type of support system. And while talking about the information, the system will use the geospatial and economic data driven analytics. So the platform or the application will provide what can be grown in a specific field location, and when it can be grown. So this sort of information for the farmers it will provide. Secondly, it will provide farmers the how part of it, that what are the farm management solutions, basically the digitizing, how to digitizing the farm, how to create the farmers profiles, because in Nepal since 2015 we are using farm diaries. IFAD project beneficiaries are using farm diaries. They are getting information, but what we realized that all these separate digital tools that we were using were not sufficient enough to solve the problem, or to support the need from both ends. So that we were getting into a comprehensive Kishan application. And then the application will also provide advisory and communication services. It will include the call center, where some technicians will be answering the problem of the farmers. It will have the weather forecast communication to those farmers who have access to application. And it will have some other information in terms of crop and livestock. In addition to that, it will have market platform related information, and also on the credit side of information that it will have. Now, basically, what we are thinking is that it is working with 3 IFAD ongoing projects at the moment. So once the current financing will be over, still the 3 IFAD financing project will continue getting into that, so that we hope that by the end of the 3rd year, at least down the road from 2021, we are expecting that we will be able to reach out to 100,000 farmers, in different provinces, covering 28 districts out of 77 districts. And it has also been agreed with a lead project agency, which is the Agricultural Development Bank, and which has a significant number of existing clients that the Agricultural Development Bank Limited will continue to expand these facilities to all other districts of Nepal. This is we are pretty confident on that, because of the reason that it has been included in the national program and budget and monetary policy of the government for this current fiscal year 2021, and has been endorsed from the parliament. So it is likely to be, it is now becoming a national policy. So the bank will be scaling up it at that. And in terms of alignment, the next alignment that Nepal has developed an agriculture development strategy or 20-year vision for agriculture development in 2015. And Ministry of Agriculture has developed a long-term vision. So the project contributes to both of the objective of the ADS and also the long-term vision of the government ministry. The lead project agency has already been designated as the lead bank for extending agricultural lending in the country, and subsequently the Agricultural Development Bank has also been authorized to issue agricultural bond, and it has also already issued the first tranche of the agriculture bond, which is equivalent to 4 billion, which is equivalent, 6 billion Nepali rupees already. There has been high demand already. So since we were very much hard hit by the second wave from March 2021, the movement restricted, and we were not very able to speed up the implementation of the project. So what we have been able to do is that Kisan card and Kisan application, the first phase of both of the thing has been launched in January already, and which has been little bit slowed down due to the second wave. So far, we have reached out 5.3% of the over 5% total beneficiaries. Around 5% of the rural producers are connected to this platform for information, accessing information, and sending and receiving fund. Around 17% of the total beneficiaries are now connected using services, either Kisan card or the Kisan application, and 5% of the farmers are using Kisan application and getting regular advisory services. We are not in a position to speed up so quickly because of the reason that we wanted to install 700 MPOs, merchant point of sales installation, but as all these equipment needed to be imported from a third country, then we were unable to get supply of these things. So we hope that as the pandemic second wave is slowing down, we expect that the situation will be improved, and we will be able from maybe August onwards that we will be able to accelerate the process. So this is in brief what we are doing in Nepal with one of the rural poor stimulus facility project. I will be happy to answer any question from the audience. Over to Karim now.
Thank you very much, Bashu, for sharing this Nepal experience and the role of IFAD in deploying this Kisan application. What I really like is the scaling up mindset, the fact that there are really clear thinking about expanding the menu of services supported by the application, as well as geographical expansion to make sure we reach to the maximum number of beneficiaries. This pandemic has definitely brought a huge impact on the livelihood of farmers, but there is definitely a silver lining in the sense it really accelerated the the deployment and the uptake of digital solution like this. And we have many, many other examples across IFAD country programs. But these solutions definitely need to be sustained and brought to the right scale. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Chingu Kimura, the Senior Natural Resource and Agriculture Specialist in the East Asia Department of the Asian Development Bank, to share with us insights into the ADB work in this field. Over to you, Chingu.
Yes, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting ADB to share our view on the digital technologies for sustainable and resilient food system. Transformation of food system is one of the key topics in the in the resilient and sustainable recovery from COVID, and we see a great opportunities of leveraging digital technology in food system transformations in Asia. You know that Asia has a very limited natural resource base, like land and water. Region has more potential to promote this technology-intensive agriculture to be more competitive. And sector can be digital technology can improve the productivity of entire food supply chains. From production to distributions, from precision farming to the e-commerce. And also, it's a very important tool for integrating, Asia's big number of smallholders to value chains and the different services, including this financial service that the Grow Asia report mentioned. And it's also important tools to the for the sustainability purpose. So digital technology can offer traceability of environmental climate footprints so that the consumer can know how much those environmental footprint has on their products they purchase, and also reducing food and waste because it's increasing the productivity in the food supply chain. And for example, like in China and Korea, we see those benefits on the production, increasing access to extension service, of course, financial services, lending, and also the marketing services. And the main point is, I think it's because of these technologies, the food supply chain become more demand-driven, so that the farmer can produce based on the demand at the consumer side. And it reduces the transaction cost of contract farming, and it improves the quality standard of food safety compliances monitoring. So that's a great benefit. And in the distribution, particularly in China, the e-commerce has been accelerated in the pandemic, and it really contributed to the maintenance of food supply chain during the pandemic. And it already ensured more stable supply and reduced food waste. For example, those perishable market, like vegetable fruits, we see like 30–40% of the food was lost during the supply chain. But we see the example that this digitalized food supply chain reduced food waste to very small, few percent of the amount. And at the consumption stage, the consumer has access to this contactless delivery and increased access to product information, as I explained. And in Korea, we see also example this digitalization is benefiting rural welfare. For example, that the farmer can have access to education, culture, healthcare service through the network services in a remote island in Korea. In the Philippines, actually, our integrated natural resource and environmental management project with IFAD is demonstrating the application of geotag and drone technologies. And those technologies significantly improve the monitoring of management of project field activities, despite the disruptions in the COVID-19. For example, in this geotag, you see in the QR code, you can exactly locate where is these locations, even though we cannot visit the field, and the drone technology can see the development of this forestry project. And this application is anticipated to be replicated by the government programs and contributing to the forest management in the Philippines. And but there are tremendous opportunities, but also big challenges we face, particularly the inclusiveness part of digital agriculture. For example, of course, it's important to have a network coverage, affordable network coverage, but in particular in the least developed country in Asia, they have still problem have access to those networks. But also we found the important aspect is that if there's not enough logistical infrastructure, there is no development of those. The farmer cannot fully benefit from this, digital technology. For example, we have studied that around 70% of the farmers in rural China are not interested in e-commerce because of the lack of storage, preservation, transportation facilities. So the e-commerce in China has been very much benefiting a lot of our rural community, but it has been always said that it hasn't reached to the most disadvantaged area. So it could create more inequalities, due to the different access to digital infrastructure. And we also think it's data governance issue, for example, privacy issues, who own the data, and those basic soft institutional infrastructure is very also important in the digital infrastructure. And of course, in terms of the skills, even though there's a supply of technology, if there's a lack of skill in the adoptions, we have a problem. So there's a missing support for smallholder farmers to adopt digital applications and technology. So that's where we see some role for the public institution like us, and government and donor can intervene so that we can reduce the digital divide. So just let me introduce ADB's activities. Also do investment project and also knowledge sharing project. And the investment project, we see inclusiveness of this digital agriculture. We have in Gansu Internet Plus Agriculture Development Project, which is supporting this comprehensive information service system, but also together with modern agriculture production, processing, storage, marketing, those infrastructure service, basic logistic infrastructure. We also in Cambodia, we have agriculture value chain competitiveness and safety enhancement project. This is also supporting the development of digital infrastructures, government service through the integrated agriculture data platforms. We published already 2 work on the ICT application in agriculture in China, and also we are working with private sector. We have working with Alibaba Group on a joint study on digitalization of food supply chain in China. And we also transferring the knowledge of developed country with the country in the Southeast Asia, and particularly we working with Korea and trying to get lessons from Korea's experience of agricultural development and in the digital technologies. So in conclusion, we see digital technology can address challenge in the food system Asia, but it really require public actions together with this innovation in the private sector. So it's important to develop both hard and soft infrastructure that I explained to increase the availability of affordable connectivity and digital applications. And the skill development is very much important. So we need more favorable environment to foster this innovation and startup ecosystem to encourage adoption of those technologies. And we also see a great opportunity for making this traceability system to create new financing channels for actions to preserve natural capital and ecosystem services. This is something we could explore further, that those technology can be useful for the sustainable agriculture and the food supply chain. And I think we are very much looking forward to collaborating with other donor agencies, government. And then we are now working on the conceptualizing the idea of innovative natural capital financing facility as a new financing channel for collaboration. So this is composed of some co-financing fund, natural capital fund, but also in this concept, we have this agribusiness service platform that where we can work with the private sector and public sector on the digitalization of food supply chain to assist project sponsors to improve the upgrade value creations, the marketing, procurement, logistics effort. So this is some concrete idea that we have for the further collaboration. We're already talking to IFAD about this idea. So with that, I stop my presentation. Thank you very much.
And in that regard, I really welcome this new initiative on natural capital innovation. So these are really excellent ideas that we could really pursue together, and as we proceed and as we work on enhancing the uptake of digital tools into agriculture and rural development in general. So these are really good ideas that we need to explore and then discuss later on during this event, and more broadly during our entire practice in the region. I would like now to invite my colleague from Australia, Ms. Purdue Bowden, Assistant Director, Private Finance for Climate and Development, for her to share with us Australia's experience to engaging with the private sector in development. Over to you, Purdue.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much to IFAD for hosting, and to Greta for what is I think a really useful and insightful report, and Paul for your presentation. I think asking the question, where does the donor fit in into such a complex landscape, is a really great question, and something we're always asking ourselves. Thanks also Bashu for sharing about what sounds like a really promising initiative, and Shingo for the snapshot of the ADB's work in this area. I want to start just briefly outlining Australia's general approach to ag and food security, and then I'll go into more detail about a particular private sector focused initiative, with the disclaimer first that I am not an agriculture expert. Fortunately, I believe Tristan Armstrong from our ag team is on the line. So if there's any tricky technical questions on the ag side, he'll be able to answer them on DFAT's behalf. So the Australian Aid Program and DFAT's work in this space is focused on Southeast Asia and the Pacific regionally, and on smallholder farmers. So in the Asia Pacific region, smallholder farmers own and operate the vast majority of farmland. Most of the farms are smaller than 5 hectares, and on average, less than 25% of what is produced is consumed by their own families. So the remaining is sold on markets. This income is vital for household needs, for healthcare, and for education. So working with farmers to improve their income earning potential is critical to improving well-being. Incomes can be improved by increasing farm productivity through access to better inputs, access to finance and to knowledge, and by helping farmers bring the right products and the right quality to markets at the right time. So digital solutions, as we've heard already this evening for us, or perhaps earlier in the day for some of you, can play a really important role. So in the digital space, the work we've done to date in this area includes funding studies. So in 2019, DFAT funded GSMA, which is the industry organisation which represents mobile network operators, to scope digital opportunities in agriculture in PNG. It identified potential in weather monitoring and forecasting, agricultural payments, and dissemination of agronomic information and market prices. So very much a combination of the first, second, and third waves of transformation that were identified in the GrowAsia report. And secondly, we're funding platforms. So we've been a long-term funder of GrowAsia Network, which has brought together various different actors in agricultural supply chains to look at impediments, including access to digital solutions. And the current GrowAsia report that's the subject of tonight's webinar is a great example of that. Increasingly, generally in our aid program, DFAT is looking to find innovative ways to bring in the private sector. We're doing this through a range of approaches at different points, working with different actors. And today I want to talk in detail, a little bit of detail, about one of our newer initiatives, which is the Emerging Markets Impact Investing Fund. So this was established, and we'll call it EMIF. This was established in July last year. It's $40 million, that's Australian dollar, fund of funds, wholly funded by the Australian government. It aims to increase the finance that's available for SMEs in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So these SMEs often find it difficult to secure financing, and yet they are relied upon for the vast majority of employment, for driving growth, for providing goods and services, and for driving innovation. And they're particularly finding it difficult during COVID, and yet more important than ever. So the gap that we identified, as you can see from the diagram, was for SMEs that are in the early and stable growth stage. And these probably are generally not going to experience the exponential growth that makes them a target of venture capital firms. And they're just the sort of too early, too risky, or too small for your more mainstream investors to be interested in. You do see some impact investors in this space, so foundations and philanthropics and some DFIs, but again, that's more towards your higher growth or later stage SME, rather than your early SME. So EMIF is targeting early and sort of more stable growth stage. And this was also picked up as an issue in the GrowAsia report, that's impacting the agricultural sector is a lack of access to finance for these kind of earlier stage businesses, which are critical for distributing solutions. So how does EMIF work? This chart, you need to start from the bottom and go up. So EMIF kind of does basically two things in parallel. It has an investment function. So you can see the bottom navy quadrant, or rectangle rather, is the investment function. So the EMIF fund will invest into a financial intermediary. So that could be an SME fund, a venture capital fund, a fintech company, or some sort of other non-bank financial institution that might do insurance or some other product. And we will invest using a range of non-grant mechanisms. It could be equity, primarily equity or debt. Those financial intermediaries then invest in SMEs, again, using a range of instruments. The SMEs that are targeting are sort of looking for finance between 5,000 and 2 million US dollars. And alongside that, going back to the bottom of the screen, we see that we have a technical assistance facility. And that provides technical assistance and capacity building, both at the fund level and at the SME level. We're focusing on our sort of competitive advantage as a donor funded vehicle. So focusing really on improving the impact, and in particular, the gender impact of those funds and those businesses, which I'll come to in a moment. So EMIF aims to be catalytic. So you can see the pale green rectangle, again, down the bottom of the screen, is other investors. So we can, because we are government owned and have a higher tolerance for risk, we can invest using concessional finance if we need to. We can invest in a way that otherwise de-risks the transaction for the other investors to step in alongside. this, in doing so, what we hope to do is build up a track record for those financial intermediaries in which we invest, so that next time they go to market, they have a track record, they're more likely to be able to attract a greater share of more conventional investors. So I mentioned the sort of impact and gender focus. I just want to dwell on this for a moment. EMIF really is focused on yes, achieving sustainable financial outcomes, but also setting a standard, a high standard for impact investing. So this guides our choice of investments, how we manage investments, including how we use our technical assistance, and how we monitor and evaluate our impact performance and the performance of our investees. In particular, EMIF is adopting a gender lens investment approach. So we believe that empowering women is good for people and is good for business. And the opportunities are often missed because women's perspectives, and in particular women-led businesses, are underrated or overlooked. So EMIF works with our investee funds and the underlying SMEs to improve their gender approach and therefore improve their business operations. So our technical assistance can help funds and SMEs uncover hidden biases that might be impacting their ability to generate business value from a diverse workforce, supply chain, or management team. And just as a sort of concrete example, because this can often feel a bit esoteric when you're just hearing about it in the abstract. So an SME might, after working with us, identify that while it wants to attract female employees and retain them, maybe it only advertises through word of mouth networks, through word of mouth and through existing networks, and those networks happen to be male. Or maybe they hold recruitment sessions and information sessions at 7 p.m. at night, or at another time where it's difficult for women to attend. So they may be just unintentionally excluding a whole lot of potential from their workforce. And just being aware of that helps identify opportunities and capitalize on opportunities that might have been missed. We, as I said, established in July last year. We're in an advanced stage of pipeline development. So our first investment is imminent anytime now. We anticipate making, EMIF is a pilot. So with the initial investable capital, we anticipate 4 to 6 investments over the next couple of years, and those will help DFAT inform decisions about future programming and future initiatives. Again, to make this sort of more concrete for you, I wanted to give you a couple of examples of potential investees and try to make the link to how they impact on the sort of digital agriculture space. So example one is a fintech fund. So this is a fund that EMIF would invest in, and it provides debt finance to fintech companies. And these are companies that provide either digital lending or related financial services to micro SMEs and SMEs, predominantly in Southeast Asia. So the Grow Asia report mentions the role of digital lending to provide solutions for farmers and the potential that it has to continue to spread. The investment in this fintech fund will help channel an additional likely $200 million into digital lending and related financial services. That's with a relatively small investment from EMIF, but as I said, it's catalytic. So our ability to provide first loss finance means that other investors are able to step in with greater security, and then that investment is recycled. So around $200 million in finance over the 6-year term. It's not sector specific, but we do anticipate it will reach agriculture sector, including, for example, one of the underlying SMEs or the fintech companies is a company that lends exclusively to female micro entrepreneurs in rural Indonesia, many of whom are farmers. The second example is a venture capital fund with a strong impact focus and based in Vietnam. And it's focused on a range of kind of high impact sectors, including agri-tech companies and in particular those whose products improve productivity and improve the ability of their clients to weather climate change. So we are excited about EMIF, very happy to answer more questions as we go on, but excited for a range of reasons. It is one of Australia's first forays into non-grant financing for our aid program. So it's really a market building initiative, supporting sustainable private sector led solutions across various sectors, including agriculture. Its catalytic nature means we can do more with our ODA, and we can also recycle those funds to reinvest. It's also exciting for the impact and its reach. So looking at investments that might happen, so digital lending in agriculture, it has potential for the direct impact of that particular financial transaction, but also because we see this as a gateway. So it might be a first entry point for people to access digital services. And then once they're there, they provide training, they have a credit rating, they have increased financial inclusion, and then that allows them to continue to grow their business, manage risks through other products like insurances, etc. And really is a gateway for improved livelihood. I'll end there and pass back, but thank you for your attention and I look forward to discussion.
Thank you very much, Purdue, for this excellent presentation. I think you managed to share your excitement with us. We're also getting excited about this innovative tool, and definitely this impact fund and the gender lens and also the inclusiveness aspect and the multi-sector aspects are really very attractive to donors. As IFAD is also starting its own non-sovereign operations, we can also look into some concrete opportunities where we can join forces in the countries that we both target. So excellent. I think we've really heard a lot. We've seen how digital agriculture are really being posited as a game changer in many countries. We've seen how we could cluster and those solutions and how we could really make sure we bring them to scale. We've seen many examples in many countries, but there are two things that we would like to focus on during this Q&A session. We are behind schedule, so we're gonna really try to maximize interactions during the 20-25 minutes left. So basically, we would like just to see whether there is really a common understanding about the fact that there is an acceleration and the fact that the levers that Grow Asia has identified in the report are really the right ones, and that we can all bring our efforts and converge towards those levers. And my second question would be, what can we concretely, the three of us, the three institutions, do in the medium, on the short, medium, and long term? Any concrete ideas that we can really bring to scale and start working on together? So these are kind of a broad framing questions, but don't really stick to that. If you need to bring up anything else, please do. So with that, I open the floor for questions, comments, reactions. The chat box is open as well. So please come forward and interact with our distinguished panelists. Over. Let me just see who is raising his or her hand. Yeah. So I see Marie-Aude, a colleague from IFAD, asking for the floor. Marie-Aude, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for organizing this event. So as the regional agronomist, I had a keen interest to review the part on agro-advisory services, where Paul mentioned that this is interesting, but a lot of examples fail, and I love a lot the study you did on adoption, and I disseminated as much. But I mean, I would like to reconcile that, as you say, there is a number of obstacles for agro-advisory services because they can't use it or they are not interested. But on the other hand, it's everywhere. There is a demand and there is a need and the interest on that is still there. So for me, I think we need to reflect, and it's across the services, on the service delivery model at the last mile. As you say, we can't imagine that your last mile farmers in remote area, your illiterate farmer that will have 100% outreach and use of this tool, especially the more complex one. So I think what we need to work on is this, what is the intermediate? What is the digital champion? How can we empower? In IFAD, we work a lot with last mile extension workers, lead farmer groups. So how we can enhance the collaboration and the use of this last mile that can be your target users, not the last mile farmer that prefer just to interact through WhatsApp, but how we can merge these two, how we can empower the grassroots to use and then disseminate and make it as a peer-to-peer. Because I think we saw it everywhere. So it's a general question, not to make it, to throw it away too fast, but rather to reflect how we can integrate some of this service along that and build a revenue mechanism and business models and so on.
Absolutely, definitely, Marie-Aude. I mean, this is really inherent to the inclusiveness debate. I mean, how we can bring this, you call it last mile, but the others will call the first mile. So just basically at how you can really reach and knock on the door of those smallholders, rural inhabitants that tend to be disconnected and not really properly serviced. I have Ivan Kosyu, our colleague from Indonesia, the head of our hub in Indonesia. And after Ivan, I would like also to invite our colleague Tawfiq Al-Zabri also to share some insights about his ongoing work with the Australian and the Pacific region. Over
Thank
to
you, Karim.
Ivan.
Thank you, Karim, and thank you, colleagues. I will be very brief. My name is Ivan Kosio. I am country representative for Indonesia and PNG. And I have to say, to go to the point, that I was a little bit surprised with one of the conclusions that the colleague from Grow Asia presented when he or they or you consider that there is not much room for an institution like IFAD or other institutions. You call them donors. I prefer to call ourselves financiers. In order to provide advisory services. More or less in the same line that Marie-Aude mentioned 1 minute before, I sincerely believe that the potential for us is more to approach small farmers to the use of ICT tools in order for them to access services and information for better producing, accessing information on markets, accessing technologies, etc., etc. And all of that I would put under the advisory label, let's say. No, maybe, however, I don't know, Paul, and maybe a brief explanation or clarification from your side is needed. Because in reality, when I think on ICT for agricultural development, I'm thinking on small farmers accessing ICT tools in order to do better their work, what means increasing and improving production, productivity, and income. I don't know if maybe the approach of Grow Asia is how to strengthen and develop more the infrastructure and the technology development. For example, you mentioned that one area where you see, or you Grow Asia, see a potential is on policy advocacy. I don't know if an institution like IFAD will be in conditions to really advocate more than what markets can advocate in benefit for the countries to further develop the coverage and the ICT services that are provided. I know it's a little bit provocative, sorry for that, but that was my thought and my question. Thank you.
No problem, Ivan. We need to be provocative. We need to challenge.
So good stuff. Just to look at a quick response to that one. So you would have seen that one of our strongest recommendations is to focus on messaging and mobile communication with farmers. And I think the differentiation we would draw with advisory is that we would caution against the development of advisory applications, advisory databases, advisory websites, and really encourage donors and NGOs and government extension agencies to use messaging services to reach farmers, as Marie-Aude has really already spoken about using those influencers to go that last bit to the farmer using messaging and social media. I think that's where we can have a real impact and alignment with the way farmers are indeed preferring to use these technologies.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul. Any other reactions from the floor? I see Taufik, hi. Yes. Over to you.
Hi, Karim. Thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you, colleagues, for very interesting presentations. So I'm Taufik Al-Zabri. I'm Country Director at IFAD for the Pacific Islands. And I just wanted to share an example, a couple of examples for the discussions. One is, related to these issues of advisory services. So working in the Pacific, as you know, it's very dispersed and remote, already facing a lot of logistic challenges even before COVID, and probably more so, much more so with COVID. And so ICT is really was of interest for the agriculture sector for some time. IFAD invested in a couple of kind of competitions or hack labs and supported a couple of entrepreneurs or startups with very small amount of funds, like I think $10,000 to $20,000 amounts would be more than sufficient to start these kind of initiatives. And when COVID hit, I mean, they were already quite interesting, but when COVID hit, there was a lot of interest. One of them was an advisory services app called MyCana in Fiji, and that was the interest is because a lot of people, not only the value supply chain is disrupted, but also people lost their jobs and they were looking to, go back to kind of a more traditional or relying on the natural resources rather than on employment. And, the advisory services was really very much appreciated and picked up with a focus on nutrition, which is a big issue, nutritious foods, a big issue in the Pacific Islands. The other one, another one that was more on value chain management, we actually supported them also to try to do some crowdsourcing. And this is where my question is more about the bundling with other services. I think it's really interesting, the challenges, the specific platforms, what potential they have, but to some degree they could be bundled with other non-agricultural services. One of those services can be crowdsourcing. What we did is we supported one of the startups to collect information about food supply and food prices. Very often the data we have is kind of looking at wholesale markets or larger markets, but it does not describe the situation in more vulnerable or food insecure areas. So we're able to actually pay users to actually use to provide information, and then also that information has value also for market actors, and can be is part of the strategy of cost recovery for the startup. So we're bundling that with crowdsourcing. And the other thing we're trying to do in Vanuatu, Australia, DFAT has supported using ICTs for social protection systems. So in order to reach areas hit by cyclones or volcanoes or so on that are hard to reach and somewhat cashless, they used a blockchain approach for delivering social protection through by recruiting vendors or market outlets to provide this kind of supply. I won't go into that system very much, but I want to say that that foundation, the fact that there were users that were for the social protection, although it was short term, it gave us an opportunity to think about, well, how can we use that blockchain? They're already using it in these remote areas. How can we use it to help with logistics, with linking to transport systems, to providing seed supply and equipment to purchases? And so we are actually gradually building on what DFAT invested in with Oxfam, in fact, to try to bring that into the agricultural supply chain and food systems. So I think this is a really interesting collaboration. And I think, while I agree with, I find much of it very convincing and very interesting, I think that limiting to specific platforms or functions might, to some degree, constrain us from cross benefits across uses. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Taufik. Definitely, I mean, digital tools are really well suited to reach out to those remote places, the seeds in the Pacific, and we're really happy to hear that there are many initiatives ongoing in that regard in partnership with the Australians. I see Tristan Armstrong asking for the floor. Tristan, please. Hello.
Thanks very much, and thanks to all the excellent presentations. I think this has been a very certainly for me, a very thought-provoking and stimulating discussion. I guess I would say a couple of things. One is that I think this is a really...
Could you introduce yourself? Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, sorry. Tristan Armstrong, I'm the Senior Sector Specialist for Ag Development at Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra. So I work with Purdy, and thanks Purdy for an excellent presentation. Look, I think what we're seeing here, is a very timely discussion. I think that we are all in our various capacities engaged in a range of, I guess, pilot activities or even activities at scale that involve digital outreach to smallholder farmers. I think in many of the countries that we work, we have digital penetration, which is actually much broader and wider than the reach of government or possibly even the reach of the private sector in many places. So there's a great potential to engage farmers that currently are not accessing services, are not accessing finance, are not accessing information. I think that what we've seen is a discussion of an enormous diversity of possibilities that this new platform offers us as donors, and I think that the ball is very much in our court to come up with ideas and to trial those ideas and to share the results of the work that we're doing. There are a lot of examples that have been discussed today. There are many examples out there beyond this room of very interesting, innovative applications of some of these ideas in the real world. And I think that whether that we have an opportunity as donors to actually influence the trajectory of the growth of this industry, and I think that's how we need to be viewing this, because I mean, certainly the business, the private sector is running with this technology at scale across the developed and increasingly the developing world, and so actually providing opportunities for smallholders and people who are remote from market and who face structural constraints, I think is becoming even more important as they face a larger gap in terms of productivity and efficiency because of the uptake of these new ideas by mainstream agriculture. So I just would encourage all of us to go away and to really think about how we can apply these ideas to some of our focal countries and some of our focus industries. But thanks all speakers. Over.
Thank you, Tristan. Absolutely. I mean, for finance here, as Ivan said, to influence the trajectories of digital tools, we need first also to be mindful about the ecosystem and also to understand what's going on, just to try to sort out among the plethora of tools out there, which are the ones that we could screen against the metrics of inclusiveness, against sustainability, and against the likely business model, the kind of business models that we could support. Now I would like to invite Mr. Jingfeng Zhang, the Director of Environment, Natural Resource and Agriculture Division and the Southeast Asia Department of the Asian Development Bank, for closing remarks for today's event.
Thank you very much, Karim. And thank you so much for IFAD to invite the ADB to be co-host for this very interesting webinar. And also taking this opportunity, actually, I'm also very pleased to see many colleagues and friends from IFAD, Grow Asia, and the DFAT, as well as from other organizations. Very pleased to meet you virtually. This webinar is very interesting, and the discussions are also very insightful. And from my side, I think maybe just using opportunity to answer one question that Karim you asked about, how, for example, IFAD, ADB, DFAT, as well as other partners can further working together to support the digital agriculture in the region. From my side, actually, I have a couple of take-home messages from these discussions. What I see is that basically, I think we can continue our collaborations and to continue to promote the digital agriculture specifically in 5 major areas in the region. Actually, Grow Asia has also made very good recommendations in the report, and we just need to fine tune, as well as we need to see how those recommendations can be taken up, as well as packaged to fit in our operations, for example, from IFAD side or from ADB side. And we also need to work in partnership with the private sector, as well as with other stakeholders. The 5 major areas I think we can further working together. The first area is on ICT platform for climate smart agribusiness. For example, we have talked about the agricultural market information system, climate risk management system, as well as a demonstration of the climate smart agriculture by application of Internet of Things and relevant technologies. It's also very important for us to help the farmers as well as the government to use the remote sensing technologies, for example, for precision farming or for advisory services. Another important area we can promote is on the crop insurance to strengthen the climate and disaster resilience. The second major area I think we can strengthen our collaboration to support the farmers is on the mobile banking and the finance. And in the Grow Asia report, actually, it is highlighted like a digital payment, digital trading, as well as digital lending. And the example shared by the Paul colleague on the Kisan card is also very interesting. And actually from ADB side, we are also working on agriculture digital finance services to provide smallholder producers with access to seasonal digital credit to purchase improved seed, agrochemicals, as well as mechanization services. The third area I would like to mention is the digital infrastructure, which is emphasized by my colleague in the presentation. In terms of digital infrastructure, one very important area is for us to look into the traceability. For example, under the GMS Sustainable Agriculture and the Food Security Program, ADB is supporting the GMS countries in developing and demonstrating digital technology-based farm-to-fork traceability solutions for organic agricultural products. And also actually, we appreciate very much, like for example, Grow Asia as well as other partners have also joined our inception workshop for this GMS agriculture and food security program. Thank you so much. Another important area I want to mention is that what we have been talking about is about the agricultural farming, but we also need to look into, for example, livestock. Especially given the COVID-19 situation, very, very important for us to look into this One Health issue, considering, for example, human being health, animal health, as well as ecology health. So from ADB side, for example, ADB is helping the countries in developing ICT-supported livestock health and food safety services. We are working on a GMS cross-border livestock health and value chain improvement projects in GMS countries. And the specific initiatives we are promoting with the government to support the livestock farmers are, for example, ICT-supported animal identification program, animal health information system, as well as laboratory information management system. And the last but not the least area is on digital agricultural policy or strategy development, or what Grow Asia mentioned as policy advocacy. But for us, we will see it's more like to support in coming up, enabling environment for the government to come up with good policies to support the digital agriculture. And also, one example has already mentioned in Shingo's presentation, talking about the Cambodia agricultural value chain competitiveness and the safety enhancement project. I also want to mention that on this project, ADB and AFD are working together in supporting the government to prepare strategic roadmap for digitalization in agriculture and to improve government capacity to provide the services with the use of digital technology for competitive and effective agricultural value chain development, which will enable the government to better serve stakeholders of agricultural value chain, such as farmers and private sector entities. So basically, this is the 5 areas that from my side, I would like to begin to further work together with the different partners, including, for example, IFAD, DFAT, as well as other organizations. And we would welcome very much, for example, we can also continue talking more about how we can work together on the natural capital lab, as well as the agribusiness financing platform, which Shingo has also introduced in his presentation. But thank you so much for the very, very good presentation and the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jiang Fen, for pointing out all these areas for joint engagement and support of the digital solutions and in support of our digital engagement in the Asia and the Pacific region. Really, really grateful for taking the time to join us to deliver these closing remarks. We took note about the excellent initiatives being pursued by ADB on Natural Capital Lab, Natural Capital Platform, and I believe that there are discussions underway, part of the partnership discussions led by my colleague in the Philippines, our representative in the Philippines. Also, we took note about the excellent initiative of the DFAT on IMIF, this impact fund, and we also would like to continue the discussion and explore possible joint investment in the fintech and the agri-tech business. These are the excellent takeaways. Of course, we will share with participants the various presentations made today, as well as a short note on the takeaways. And I would like to take advantage to thank all the speakers for the time, for the excellent insights, and for providing all these thought-provoking questions for us to ponder and think about. And I also would like to thank my colleague Ilaria Firman, who was the person behind this. She really worked tirelessly to contact speakers and broaden the scope of the presentation and present all the supporting material. Kudos for her and for all those in IFAD and ADB and Grow Asia and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia for their efforts. We are really, really pleased that you joined us today. And I hope this will be the beginning of further events and further thinking on how we broaden and deepen our support to digital agriculture and rural development in the region. With that, I would like to close. Sorry for being late by 10 minutes. And I wish you all a nice evening at your end. And I hope to see you all soon physically, hopefully in the future. Thank you very much all.